All right, yeah, well, I'm here to talk about wholesaling and option. And the first part about this, I still do this strategy. People ask me all the time, like, how did you get into real estate? What was the transition for you? Which I'm sure a lot of you kind of think to yourself, right? Like, how do I penetrate into this business? How do I get in the game, make money, right? Yeah. All right, well, this is how I did it, and I still do it till today. So the pivotal point for me was when I started building relationships with real investors that had cash in my market. Do you guys know some of those in your market? Yeah. People that really do the business? Yeah. Well, how well do you know them? Can you pick up the phone and say, hey, I got a deal? Whoa, it got real quiet when I said that. Yeah, well, Zack, exactly. That's a whole nother animal right there, because when you're in Zack's market and you know what Zack wants to buy, guess what? You have a cash buyer. And what else that means is that means if he has money, then who has money? You have money. And I'm dead serious about that, because I have a database of cash buyers in my market, but I don't really email out anymore. I just make a couple phone calls. And that's literally how we get the business done. I mean, building a big buyers list is great and sexy and fancy and all that, but at the end of the day, it just comes down to who's going to buy the deal. So building a buyers list, where can we find buyers? Let's hear it. You guys have been hearing this all weekend, and I know, let's just start saying it out there. Signs, auctions, that's a good one. Write that one down. Foreclosure auctions, tax lien auctions. The guys that are buying at those auctions, you need to be down there rubbing elbows with them and meeting them on a regular basis. You don't just do it one time and then disappear, because you'll never get any momentum in the business if you do that. So when I say building a relationship with buyers, I'm very, very serious about building that relationship. Very serious about it. I mean, so serious about it, I actually started traveling with one of my buyers. It was a guy that I sold him a house. I brought him another deal. I actually sold a couple more houses for him. Next thing you know, he's inviting me on his family vacations. How cool is that? That's the reality of it. That's the reality of it. So building relationships with cash buyers. So where else can we find cash buyers? We said foreclosure auctions. I heard some signs over here. Craigslist. Yeah, run some ghost ads. RIAs, real estate investing associations. That's another huge one. How many of you have a local RIA that you go to in your market? Everybody's hand should be going up. So if you stuck your hand up when I asked that question, give yourself 1,000 points. All right? Real estate associations, that's why we go there. That's why a lot of these associations exist, so they can bring the market together. They can share vendor services. And ultimately, we're all looking to do more business, right? We're all looking to do more business. So where else can we find buyers? You can see who bought. Yeah, that's one way. How about the World Wide Web? You think you can find some buyers online? Absolutely. Every wholesaler that's in your market is a what? Is a buyer. Every single wholesaler in your market is a buyer. So just know that if you find a deal that you just don't have a buyer for, you can go through other wholesalers' databases. That's when we start getting into the co-wholesaling, the joint venturing. I call it an option. It's the same thing. It's just a little bit different approach, and we control the properties with paperwork. So I'm going to give you guys a huge golden nugget right here. So how many of you have been driving down the road and seen a construction site going on, or like a house being rehabbed? All right. So keep your hands up. How many of you stop and get out and go talk to the people renovating the properties? Okay, well, give yourself 500 points. Whoever kept your hand up, give yourself 500 points. So what's going on at that house? A rehab's going on. They're getting it ready to flip. Whatever the case may be, they may be getting it ready to put a renter in there. But at the end of the day, what is that person to me? That could be a potential what? Potential buyer. So there's no harm and no foul just getting out of your car, walking up onto a job site, handing them a business card and saying, hey, I'm in the business, or just say, hey, I'm new to the business, or what are you looking to buy? They'll tell you what they're looking to buy, because listen, guys that are running crews and doing high volume real estate, most of those buyers, they don't run their own marketing systems. They just buy from other wholesalers. They call that blowing and going. And that's what these guys want to do. They're everywhere. They're everywhere. I would say probably 97% of all the people rehabbing in any one market doesn't do their own marketing. Why do you think the MLS gets gobbled up? You guys seeing that? Properties go on the MLS, they just get gobbled up. I love the MLS for selling houses. We'll buy them, we'll clean them up, and we'll just put them up as is and just let everybody bid them up. Sell them off. So here's a exercise that I want all of you guys to do. I want you to go online. I want you to go to Google. I want you to type in your city and we buy houses. Then you're going to see a bunch of websites come up, right? Go to every single website and put your information in. And we're going to be doing that for two reasons. One reason is we want wholesalers sending us what? Deals. We want to get on their list. We want to see the inventory that's coming from them. Right? So that's a source of properties. And most of the time they're off market. So I'm going to swing back up to that one here in a second. But the other thing is I want to get connected to those wholesalers so I can leverage their what? I already told you. Their buyers, their database. Okay, you guys see where I'm going with this? So we're going to go to Google. We're going to type in your city, we buy houses. All these websites are going to pop up. You just start clicking on them. And I guarantee you, if you do this exercise once or twice a week, literally within 3 to 4 months, you'll have properties flooding your inbox. Flooding. I have an email dedicated. I just touched my chest because I have my phone in my pocket here. I have an email dedicated for wholesalers. All day long, I see properties come across. All day long. Sometimes I buy them. Sometimes I'll line up somebody else, which is a cash buyer, to do this strategy. How many of you would think it'd be cool to make money just from looking at emails? Okay, so why do we want to get on other wholesalers' lists, right? Because they're going to send you what? They're going to send you deals. And when you have a buyer that you know exactly what their criteria is, now you have the capital behind you to put a deal together. Because at the end of the day, investors are looking for deals. If you bring me a deal that makes sense to me, I don't care if you make 5, 10, 20 grand. If we're making our numbers, we're happy. Same thing with Zack, same thing with all the big players in your area. So you guys clear on where you can find buyers. Pretty simple, right? All right, so the last golden nugget here about finding buyers. Spend all that time getting in all those lists. When all those wholesalers are sending you properties, I want you to take those addresses and put them in a spreadsheet. And about once every 2 to 3 weeks, I want you to drive by all those properties that came across the wholesale list. Why is that? Why would I want to go drive by one of those houses?
See if they're sold or not.
Well, the person that bought the house, there's going to be a real cash buyer renovating the house. So if I saw an email today on a house, I wrote the address down. 3 to 4 weeks later, if I happen to drive by and see a crew outside working on the house, then I know that there is a real cash buyer on that property. Remember, there's no harm, no foul driving down the road and seeing a job site. So you think you can find some real cash buyers in your market with just those few strategies that I gave you? That's the reality of it. That's the reality of it. You got to get out there, build some relationships. I mean, it's great to meet somebody that says they're a cash buyer, throw them in your database, and then you never talk to them again. They might buy from you. But if someone gave you their criteria, then you called them back next week, the week after that, right? Then you're going to start having a different conversation with them. Hey, how are the kids? Oh, we're doing this, we're doing that, right? You're really building a relationship with them. So when you do come across a property that your cash buyer wants, you have a relationship, you know they have the money, guess what? Guess who's going to get paid? You're going to get paid when you put that deal together. That's the reality of it. That's how easy the business can be. And I know there's a lot of moving parts. There's a lot of moving parts. It can be overwhelming at times. Right? Right? There's a lot going on. You know, when I first started, I didn't know what was going on, so I had to go fail. Then I had to go hire somebody. And then I found Zack, and that was it. That was it. That was game over for me. So he took me under his wing, and we just took off. So those of you that have the ability to work with Zack, I'd highly recommend it because it'll change your life. It could change my life. And the guys and the folks that are involved with Zack, it's a lifelong thing. Like we just did a bus tour a couple weeks ago. We're taking our students on a cruise. Who wants to go on a cruise with us?
Right there, baby.
Yeah? This is real deal. This is real stuff. This is no joke. I mean, we're in the business, and Zack is an amazing person. So let's keep moving on because I got limited time. I just wanted to drive home the relationship thing with cash buyers because I have cash buyers in my market that are my friends. I actually went go-karting with one of them on Wednesday night. He paid for it. He's like, hey, come ride go-karts with us. Okay. Go race go-karts. All right. Sellers. Where can you find sellers? Everywhere. They're online. Yes, you want off-market properties, right? Those are going to be the biggest things. But see, here's the thing. Whenever you're not experienced in the business, you're afraid to spend money, right? If you're afraid to spend money on marketing because you don't know how to convert those leads. So you got to get on the phone and you got to start reaching out to the market because if the market is not reaching out to you, you have to reach out to the market. And when you first start, you have to reach out to the market. You're going to call for sale by owners. You're going to call the for rent ads. Just start calling people. Go through the scripts. You have the things to ask them right in front of you. You have all the paperwork and the tools. You just got to get out there and go do it, make it happen. You got to start making phone calls. Right? So if you know you have a group of buyers that you know exactly what they want and they have cash, now you have a little bit more confidence, right? So I'm going to start hitting the phones. I'm going to call wholesalers. I'm going to call for rent ads. I'm going to call for sale by owners. I'm going to just start calling people. And if I can find someone that's somewhat motivated and I know that they're asking somewhere around what my buyer would pay, then I can put a deal together pretty quickly. So you're going to have two types of sellers that you're going to target. You're going to have people that are looking to sell their house for all cash or someone that's going to look to sell their house on terms, right? Cash terms. Terms means, hey, I'll give you $5,000 down and I'll just make you payments after that. That's terms. We got a couple different ways we can write that up. It's the same thing with buyers. You have cash buyers and you have tenant buyers, someone looking to make a payment and move into the property. So you could essentially build two types of funnels with your buyers, tenant buyers, cash buyers. Cash buyers are going to be the investors that repeat business over and over and over. Tenant buyers are going to be the people that are just going to give a payment, move into the property one time, you'll probably never talk to them again. It's easier to do it with cash buyers because when you're first getting started in the business, you really don't understand the term side of it very much. It's a little foggy, it's a little hazy. It gets real kind of creative and you got to really understand how the numbers work to put those deals together. So sellers are everywhere. So I just gave you some tools on how you can get motivated sellers because trust me, wholesalers are motivated sellers. They want to sell those properties fast. They want to sell them fast. So if you have wholesalers sending you deals, they're typically off market, they're typically under contract and in escrow and they're ready to close. So when you have sellers sending you properties, which can be other wholesalers, and you know that you have cash buyers that may want that, put a spread on it, send it over to your buyer. I even tell the guys that I work with, like, hey, they're asking 65. Well, what do you want? 3? I'm not greedy. I wouldn't say 30. 3, okay, great. We sign it up. I just made $3,000. Like created it out of thin air. Created it out of thin air. I just had one literally this week. I have a guy down in San Antonio that has cash buyers. A buddy of mine calls me. He's like, hey, I'm buying a house down in San Antonio. I was like, what do you want for it? He's like, 55. I said, all right, I'll call you back. Called Pat, left Pat a message. He calls me back, said, hey, we got that house. It's like, go sell it for whatever you can get for it. We'll split it. He's like, what does he want? 55. Literally, 20 minutes later, he sends me a text. We got it. So it was just like literally, we just made a couple phone calls. I called a buddy that had a cash buyer. I knew the seller. That's how easy it is to put deals together. Now, it doesn't happen like that every single day. You don't just pick the phone up and make $3,000. How cool would that be? Every time you made a phone call, you made $3,000. How many phone calls would you make a day if you knew that you were going to...
I'd never sleep.
Right? All right, so yeah, you see where I'm getting to, right? If the market is not reaching out to you, you got to do what? You got to reach out to the market. You know, Zack has a coaching student who I got the pleasure of meeting, and so did you guys. a couple weeks ago from Australia. He's from Australia. He'd been through some other programs, very, very disappointed. Found Zack just like I did and said, "You're my guy," and I didn't go anywhere else after that. So Zack started working with him, and literally he came up, he flew from Australia to spend 3 days with us in Huntsville a couple weeks ago, and the guy is just pounding the phones. And he's lining up seller finance transactions. He's just finding people that will finance him because he can't get financing in the States right now. So they're working on a plan of how he can get his tax returns going and establish a business here in the United States. So after 24 months, he'll be able to get legitimate bank financing, stuff like that. So he needs financing. So he is creating the opportunities by the phone calls he's making. He's literally creating opportunities. Because anyone that has a house for rent, I love houses for rent because they're vacant and they want to get somebody in there fast. They want somebody in there yesterday, right? They want a payment. So if someone has a house for rent, you could call them up and say, "Hey, would you be willing to lease your property long term with the option to purchase if I took care of all the repairs and maintenance?" How would that sound to you? That sounds pretty good, right? I have a house for lease. Somebody says they want to lease it. They want to take care of all the repairs. Why the heck not? That's the reality of it. That's the reality of hitting the phones. What they call that, pounding the phones. So think about that. Every time you pick up the phone, this could be 10 grand. It could be 10 grand. It could be 10 grand. Would you pick up the phone and dial if you knew it was 10 grand every time? How many times a day would we do that? I'm going to make $1 million today. It'd be a race, right? That's the reality of how the market is. You've got to reach out to the market. If the market isn't reaching out to you, you got to reach out to the market. So those are some sellers. Those are some seller strategies there. So now I'm going to talk about an option. I use the word option very loosely just because I completely understand it. All right, an option just gives you the right to buy for a specified price for a specified time period. Okay, that's a little different than going under contract with someone saying, "I'm going to purchase your property for $100,000. That person is expecting you to buy it for $100,000, right? Regardless of where I'm getting the money to buy it, that seller is expecting you to buy it for $100,000. So the conversation would be a little bit different if I said, "Hey, Mr. Seller, see you're asking $100,000, yeah? I tell you what, this house doesn't necessarily work for me, but I have a group of investor partners that it may work for. Would you mind if I put your property in front of them? If I could bring you a buyer at $100,000, would that work for you?" Did I just negotiate a win-win? Right, but it didn't obligate me to buy it. Does that make sense? Is that clear as mud or clear as water? That's pretty simple, right? That's what an option does. So if you're calling people and talking to them, and you're afraid about how you're going to raise the money, or just say, "Hey, I have some investor partner friends that may want to buy this property. I see you're asking $100,000. If I bring you a buyer, would it make sense to do the deal with them? Yeah, of course I'm going to put a spread on it." But that's what it is. That's how I can just simply explain what an option does. It just gives me the right to buy. It's just called an option to purchase. You can also use the agreements that you have, which Zack's going to go into detail here in a little bit. Co-wholesaling, it's the same thing. I just need to get an agreement to market the property. I just do it a little bit differently. It's the same means to the same end. We're just calling it something a little different, and we're writing it up a little different. It's the same thing. 100,000, I'm going to put a spread on it for 105. You're happy at 105. We write up an agreement. I put you guys in contract together. I have an agreement that protects my 5,000. I get paid. That's essentially what I'm doing with an option agreement. Is that pretty simple? That simplify it? So every time you talk to a seller, if you haven't put it all together yet, you don't have your cash buyers, or you don't have your private money or your bank financing, that's a little bit different way for you to get under contract with the property, right? Saying, "Hey, let me just get the option because I have some people that may want to buy that." It doesn't put me on the hook for the $100,000. But what does it do? It's going to motivate me to go find that person. Would it give you more confidence if you already knew somebody that would pay $120,000? You see somebody at $100,000, that's $20,000 right there. Then your knees start knocking. Like, "Oh my gosh, this is real. I got to do this. I got to put this deal together." That's the reality of it. The relationships in the business are so important. So important. So important. So signing the agreements with the sellers. So you can do the co-wholesaling. I would suggest this. If a wholesaler sends you a property, I'm just going to assume that they already have it under agreement, right? So with that wholesaler, I would just say, hey, let me sign a marketing fee with you, the co-wholesaling marketing agreement. Because it's already under contract. I don't need to put another contract on it. So that's just a simple document that we can write up that says, hey, if I bring in a buyer, I'm paying you 100. Whatever that number looks like, they're going to pay me out of escrow. So if you're talking to somebody that's for sale by owner, that the property is not in escrow, then I would use it's an option to purchase contract. Just to kind of give you a little teetery, just to kind of explain the difference between the two. Is that fair? Does that kind of simplify it? So signing the agreements with the seller, I like to do everything with the digital signature. You can use Adobe EchoSign, you can use DocuSign, you can do a 30-day free trial. So you can take your contract that you wrote up, you signed, and you can just load it up. You just add their email to it, put their name, drag a little signature box over it, and then you click send, and it sends out. They click it, it comes back to you. They signed it. Electronic signatures are real. So that's just an easy way to do it, because if you're expecting them to print it out, sign it, scan it, get it back in, that's a lot of technology for somebody. So ask them if they have the ability to do that. If they don't have the ability to print, sign, and all that, just load it up into a free program, DocuSign, Adobe EchoSign, one of those two, and you email it. They click, the contract comes back to you. It's a bona fide deal there. So marketing the property to your buyers. So I'll always identify a property that one of my buyers wants before I put it in front of them. I don't just send them everything. Because some people are going to see some houses that are on the market through other wholesalers. When I say on the market, on the investor market, right? The underground, the off-market, investors emailing each other back and forth and back and forth. So I'll always verify with my buyer that the property is available. I'll call them up or even text them, hey, have you seen 123 Main Street? If they haven't, I'm like, great, they haven't seen this house. So I'll put the numbers together. Another thing about doing this type of strategy is you still have to understand how to run numbers. You still need to understand the concept of running numbers. You need to know what the house is going to sell for, the after repaired value, what the carrying costs are, which yes, you can put them into formulas. I typically, you've heard the 70 cents minus repairs. So I know that if I look at a house, I want to pay 75% less repairs with the real repair estimate, because everyone always underestimates repairs. And pretty much every job you do will go over a little bit. But it's important to run numbers. And another thing that's very important about knowing your buyers is what type of buyer are they? Are they a buy and hold investor? Are they a fix and flip investor? Those are two different types of buyers, right? So my buy and hold investors, I know that they'll pay more for properties because their returns, what they're trying to get out of the property, is typically a lot less than what a flipper is. So somebody that's looking to buy it, fix it, and resell it, they need a bigger margin in the deal. So I can't bring them skinny margin deals. So if the ARV is 100 and I see something for 90, is that going to work for a flipper? You're not going to waste your time with it. So if I know that Bob will buy at 100 and I see a property come over at 40, is that something Bob might be interested in? Yes. So I'd contact that wholesaler, say, hey, I got a buyer that may be interested in this property. I'll get back to you. Call Bob. 45, Bob, you want to take it? Bob says yes. I say, great. We write it all up. I just made what? $5,000. That's how the business works. And this is the strategy to do it. I call it matchmaking. And you don't need a license to do it. You just need written agreements. Because grown people with money, when you sign agreements, like if you bought my property for 60 or just wrote it up at 60 and you found a buyer for 70 and we write that up, we're grown adults, we put it in escrow, the funds come in, it's my money to decide what I do with it. I'm going to cut you the 10 because you brought me the buyer, you brought me what I wanted. A lot of people get nervous about getting paid. Listen, folks, you have two parties. You have a buyer and a seller. And when you have an agreement with one of them, both of them, that they're going to pay you X, they're going to pay you, regardless of how you write it up. You got to write something up. So written agreements is what gets you paid, right? We're not representing anybody, right? Because I am licensed, and I understand that world very well, but I'm not representing anybody. I'm a principal in the deal. So that's the difference. You just got to get a written agreement. So when you're marketing the properties to your buyers, you need to really have an understanding of what your buyers want before you put it in front of them. And I'll set up appointments. I'll call the other people, either wholesaler, for sale by owner, whatever the case may be, because I've done it with off-market properties and I've done it with properties being marketed by other wholesalers. Just find out what's going on with the house. Sometimes they'll have a group showing set up on the weekends. Just bring your buyer out. It's not a big deal. Whenever you communicate and set the expectation with folks, we're all grown adults. Nobody's going to go around you. You know, it just depends on what's ticking up in your mind. So assigning the contract for fee. See, I've kind of been jumping all over this, right? I've been talking about this, talking about that, but do you see how it just kind of flows? I want to work with my buyers first. I want to know what they want. I'm going to go find them what they want, right? Then I'm going to go back and I'm going to negotiate an option. I'm going to get some paperwork written up from the person selling the property. Then I'm going to put it in front of my cash buyer. And when my cash buyer wants it, then we're going to write up another agreement. We're going to get paid. We're going to sign that contract for a fee. Sometimes I sign a contract. Sometimes I'll just write up, I will literally open up a blank Word document and says, Mr. Pfluger will pay Ian Flanagan $5,000 out of escrow regarding the property at 123 Main Street. Done. That's how simple it is. That's how simple it is. Mr. So-and-so will pay me $5,000 out of escrow for this property. Send it to the title company. They wire you the funds or they cut you a check. That's literally how it is when you have that relationship. But a lot of people try to get in the business and they got these blinders on. They're like, oh, I don't want to talk to them. Oh, I don't want to talk to them. Right? But you can't be that way. You've got to be able to talk to people because real estate is it's about verbal communication and paperwork. It's a people business, right? It's a people business. It's a people business. So questions. What kind of questions you guys have for me before I get out of here? Yes, ma'am. So the question is, yes, there is you can get a non-disclosure, non-circumvent agreement. I have those in my training. You can use them, yes. You can send one to your seller, send one to your buyer so they don't go around you to try to do business without you. So yes, you can get non-circumvent agreements signed. Yes, sir. It could be called an addendum because anything that's on an addendum is just an addition to the contract. What you got, buddy?
He's thinking of the memorandum.
Yeah.
See, I know
I'm
what
going
you're
to
thinking,
let
but you
him
can't
talk
even say
about
it.
memorandums here in a little bit. But for this particular strategy, I'm not going to get a memorandum signed. I actually did get a memorandum signed on a property that I have in escrow right now. So I had an agreement to buy a house. And unfortunately, someone passed away, and there's a lot of heirs that live all around the country. So we're trying to get these heirship affidavits signed. So the contract's expired. I had a cash buyer ready to go. I was going to make $8,000 on the house. I have the property in escrow, so they're dragging their feet, and they don't want to do what they need to do to get all these heirship affidavits signed. So I said, great. I went down to the county courthouse, and I filed what's called a memorandum. So that clouds the title. That basically states that I have a purchase agreement with them. So if they don't come back to me to sell the house and they try to sell it to somebody else, well, when they do the abstract, that's the history of the title. When they do that title search, guess whose memorandum is going to be sitting in there? And guess who has a written contract on the house? So they're going to have to negotiate with me to get me out of the way, basically. So that's a memorandum. That's a little different. But I'm not putting memorandums on this strategy. I'm just connecting two people. You have a house for 100. He wants it. You want to pay 105. Great. I have 5,000. Here we go. Matchmaker. That's all I'm doing. But I got to get these agreements written.